My husband's double life walked into my party. I was ready for it. My name is Amara Dlamini, and the night everything changed started like a dream I had carefully designed. The lights were warm, the music was soft, and every detail in my home was perfect. People laughed, glasses clinked, and compliments filled the air. From the outside, it looked like a celebration of love, success, and stability. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't just a party. This was the beginning of the end of a marriage betrayal story. I had been living in silence. I stood near the entrance, greeting guests with a calm smile, my eyes sharp, my mind steady. Everyone saw a confident woman hosting a beautiful evening, but no one could see the storm I had been carrying for weeks. Not even my husband, Daniel Dlamini. Especially not him. Because Daniel believed he was still in control. He believed his secrets were safe. He believed his husband double life story would never come into the light. And tonight, I was going to prove him wrong. The first time I noticed something was off, it felt small. A late-night call. A message he quickly deleted. A sudden change in routine. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. That's what love does sometimes. It makes you defend the person who is quietly breaking you. But the signs didn't stop. They grew louder. Colder. More intentional. Daniel started coming home later, offering excuses that sounded practiced. His eyes no longer met mine the same way. His touch felt distant, like he was present in body but somewhere else in mind. And that's when I started paying attention, not as a wife, but as a woman who refused to be fooled. I remember the exact moment everything shifted. Daniel was in the shower, and his phone lit up beside me. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't searching. But something inside me told me to look. And when I did, my world cracked open. A message. Just one. But it said everything. It wasn't just cheating. It was deeper. More structured. More dangerous. That message was the doorway into a hidden truth exposed that I wasn't ready for, but I walked through anyway. From that moment, I stopped reacting, and I started observing. I watched him. I listened carefully. I followed patterns. Every move he made became a clue. And slowly, painfully, the truth began to unfold. Daniel wasn't just lying. He was living another life. Another routine. Another reality that didn't include me. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just a moment of weakness. This was a full, secret family revealed, waiting to happen. And yet, I didn't confront him. Not immediately. Because I understood something powerful. When you expose someone too early, they hide better. But when you let them feel safe, they walk right into their own downfall. That's when I made my decision. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not lose control. Instead, I would prepare. Quietly. Strategically. Patiently. This was no longer just my life. This had become a revenge story time that I was going to write with precision. The party you see tonight. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a stage. Every guest invited had a reason to be here. Every detail was planned with purpose. Even the timing. Especially the timing. My best friend, Nondi Masco, walked up to me with a knowing look. She didn't say much, but she didn't need to. She had been there through it all, helping me stay grounded, helping me stay focused. Are you ready? She asked softly. I looked around the room one more time. Everything was in place. The atmosphere was perfect. The energy was right where I needed it. And then I smiled, not the kind of smile people give out of happiness, but the kind that comes from knowing exactly what is about to happen. I've never been more ready, I replied. Because tonight was not about breaking down. Tonight was about taking control. Tonight was about turning pain into power. This wasn't just another dramatic true story, This was my story. And I was done being the victim in it. Somewhere across the room, I saw Daniel laughing, completely unaware. Completely comfortable. Completely confident that his world was still intact. He had no idea that every step he had taken led him right here, into a moment he could not escape. And as I watched him, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Something stronger. Clarity. Because in that moment, I realized something important. The truth doesn't destroy you. It reveals you. And tonight, the truth was going to reveal everything. This is where it begins. Not with tears, not with confrontation, but with calm, calculated exposure. So if you think you've heard intense stories before, if you think you've seen shocking moments unfold, you haven't seen anything yet. Because what's coming next will change everything you think you know about trust, love, and betrayal. Make sure you subscribe for more stories, because this shocking relationship story is only getting started. The first crack in my marriage did not sound loud. It did not come with shouting or broken glass. It came quietly, almost politely, as if it did not want to be noticed. But I noticed it. My name is Amara Dlamini, and by the time the party was set in motion, I had already walked through weeks of silence, observation, and painful clarity. What started as a small doubt slowly grew into something undeniable. I began to understand that I was no longer living in a normal marriage. I was standing inside a carefully hidden, husband-double life story, And every day, a new piece of truth revealed itself. Daniel Dlamini had always been a composed man. He spoke with confidence, carried himself with ease, and knew how to make people feel secure. That was part of his charm. That was also part of his disguise. The change in him did not happen overnight. It was gradual, almost unnoticeable at first. He started working late more often. His explanations were smooth, but they lacked depth. He became protective of his phone in a way that felt unnatural. Even when he smiled, there was a distance in his eyes, as if his attention was divided between two worlds. At first, I tried to reason with myself. I told myself that stress could change a person, that work could create pressure, that marriage sometimes goes through quiet phases. But the patterns did not align with ordinary problems. They formed a structure, a routine that felt intentional. And once I saw that pattern, I could not unsee it. One evening, Daniel stepped outside to take a call. He spoke in a low voice, careful and controlled. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough to understand that the conversation did not belong to our life together. When he returned, he acted normal, almost too normal, as if nothing had happened. That moment stayed with me. It was not proof, but it was a signal. And from that point forward, I stopped assuming, and I started paying attention. Days turned into quiet investigations. I noticed the timing of his movements, the way he dressed differently on certain days, the subtle changes in his tone when he mentioned work. I also noticed what he avoided. Certain topics made him uncomfortable. Certain questions received short answers. The man I thought I knew was slowly becoming unfamiliar. And that unfamiliarity was the beginning of a hidden truth exposed, The confirmation came in a way I did not expect. It was not dramatic. It was simple, and that made it even more powerful. Daniel left his laptop open one morning before rushing out. I had no intention of searching, but something in me knew that this was not a coincidence. It was an opportunity. And when I looked, I found what I needed. Emails, reservations, and messages that did not belong to a single mistake. They belonged to a system. A second life that had been running parallel to mine. There were names I did not recognize, places he had never mentioned, and details that could not be explained away. That was the moment I fully understood that this was not just betrayal. This was a secret family revealed, waiting to come into the open. I sat there in silence, not reacting immediately. The weight of the truth settled slowly, but it did not break me. Instead, it sharpened my thinking. I realized that reacting emotionally would only give him the advantage. Daniel was already skilled at hiding. If I confronted him without a plan, he would deny, manipulate, and rebuild his walls. I could not allow that. I needed more than suspicion. I needed certainty. And more importantly, I needed control. From that moment, I made a quiet decision. I would not expose him in anger. I would expose him with precision. This was no longer just a marriage betrayal story. This was becoming a carefully planned, revenge story time, where every step had meaning. I reached out to someone I trusted, Nondi Masco. She listened without interruption, her expression serious but steady. She did not rush me. She did not push me toward confrontation. Instead, she reminded me of something important. Truth is powerful, she said, but timing is everything. Those words stayed with me. Timing. That was what Daniel did not expect. He believed that if the truth ever came out, it would come out in chaos, in emotion, in weakness. But I was not going to give him that. I was going to choose the moment. I was going to create the setting. I was going to control the outcome. And that is when the idea of the party became something more than a social event. It became a strategy. As the days passed, I continued to gather information, quietly and carefully. Each detail added to the bigger picture. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. I was no longer questioning what I knew. I was preparing for what I would do. And through it all, I maintained the same calm presence at home. I spoke to Daniel normally. I smiled when necessary. I allowed him to believe that everything was still under his control. That was my advantage. Because while he was living comfortably inside his deception, I was building the moment that would bring everything into the light. This was not just another dramatic true story. This was a calculated unfolding of truth. And as I stood in that carefully prepared silence, I understood one thing clearly. The first crack in a lie does not destroy it immediately. It weakens it. And once it is weak, it only takes the right moment to break it completely. That moment was coming. And when it arrived, there would be no escape. The truth did not arrive all at once. It revealed itself in layers, each one more precise than the last, each one harder to ignore. My name is Amara Dlamini, and by this point, I was no longer searching for answers. I was confirming them. What I once feared had now taken shape. I was standing in the middle of a carefully constructed, husband-double life story, and every detail I uncovered proved that this was not confusion, not coincidence, and certainly not a mistake. It was deliberate. It was structured. It was real. After discovering the messages on Daniel's laptop, I understood that I needed more than fragments. I needed a complete picture. I needed evidence that could not be denied, explained away, or hidden again. So I became patient. I observed without reacting. I listened without interrupting. I allowed Daniel to move freely, believing he was still in control of his secrets. That belief became my greatest advantage. Each day, I collected small details. Times, locations, patterns. I noticed how his schedule aligned too perfectly with certain days of the week. I noticed how he changed his tone when he spoke about specific places. There were gaps in his stories, and those gaps became my focus. Slowly, those gaps began to connect. What once looked like isolated moments turned into a clear and undeniable pattern. I was no longer dealing with suspicion. I was witnessing a hidden truth exposed in its full form. The most difficult part was not the discovery itself. It was maintaining control while I discovered it. There were moments when anger rose quickly, moments when I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, to break the silence that had taken over my home. But I understood something important. Emotion would give him power. Calm would give me clarity. And clarity was what I needed most. One afternoon, I decided to follow the pattern I had observed. Daniel had mentioned a meeting, something routine, something ordinary. But nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. I kept my distance, careful and composed, and I followed the direction his actions suggested. What I found was not shocking in appearance, but it was devastating in meaning. It was a place he had never spoken about. A space that clearly belonged to another life. And in that moment, everything aligned. The messages, the late nights, the distance, the changes in behavior. They all pointed to one reality. This was more than betrayal. This was a secret family revealed in silence, hidden behind routine and protected by lies. I did not step forward. I did not interrupt. I remained where I was, observing quietly, allowing the truth to settle fully in my mind. I needed to understand it completely before I acted on it. And once I understood, I felt something shift within me. The pain was still there, but it was no longer leading me. It was no longer controlling my thoughts. Instead, it was replaced by something stronger. Purpose. Because at that moment, I made a decision that changed everything. I would not confront Daniel in private. I would not give him the opportunity to deny, to manipulate, or to escape accountability. I would bring the truth into the open, in a way that could not be ignored. This was no longer just a marriage betrayal story. This was becoming a carefully structured, revenge story time, where every step would lead to a single, powerful outcome. I returned home before him, composed and quiet, carrying everything I had seen and understood. When Daniel walked in later that evening, he greeted me the same way he always did, calm and confident, unaware that his world had already begun to collapse. I responded in the same tone, controlled and measured. There was no indication of what I knew. That was intentional. Because the strength of my plan depended on his comfort. As long as he believed he was safe, he would not change his behavior. And as long as he did not change, I could continue building the moment that would expose everything. Over the next few days, I refined my plan. I reviewed every detail, every piece of information, every connection I had uncovered. I spoke again with Nondi Masco, who remained steady and supportive. She understood the importance of timing, of precision, of control. Together, we ensured that nothing was left to chance. The party, which once appeared to be a simple gathering, was now a carefully designed stage. Every invitation, every arrangement, every detail carried meaning. This was not about drama. It was about truth. And truth, when presented correctly, does not need noise. It speaks for itself. I also understood that what I was preparing was not just an exposure. It was a turning point. For me, for Daniel, and for everyone who would witness it. This was a dramatic true story that was about to unfold in real time, and there would be no way to reverse it once it began. As I stood in front of the mirror that evening, preparing for the days ahead, I looked at myself carefully. Not with doubt, not with fear, but with clarity. I was no longer the woman who questioned what she felt. I was no longer the woman who waited for answers. I had found them. And now, I was ready to act on them. Because the truth, once fully uncovered, does not remain hidden. It moves forward. It demands to be seen. And when it is finally revealed, it changes everything. The moment I had been preparing for was approaching, and I knew one thing with certainty. When the truth steps into the light, it does not ask for permission. It takes its place. And when it does, there is no turning back. Preparation is a quiet form of power. It does not announce itself, and it does not rush. It builds in silence, step by step, until the moment arrives where everything aligns perfectly. My name is Amara Dlamini, and by the time the day of the party arrived, I was no longer reacting to my husband's deception. I was directing the outcome. What once began as a painful discovery had now become a carefully designed plan. This was no longer just a marriage betrayal story. It had evolved into a controlled and deliberate revenge story time, where every detail served a purpose. The house was prepared days in advance. Every room was arranged with care, every light placed to create warmth, every space designed to feel inviting. To any guest, it was a celebration of success and stability. But beneath that surface, it was something else entirely. It was a stage. A place where truth would no longer remain hidden. A place where a hidden truth exposed would unfold in full view. I moved through each room with calm precision, checking every detail, ensuring nothing was left to chance. Timing, placement, and presence were all part of the design. I understood that the strength of this moment depended not only on what would happen, but on how it would happen. Daniel Dlamini remained unaware. He moved through the house with the same confidence he always carried, speaking about the party as if it were a simple gathering. He complimented the setup, smiled at the arrangements, and thanked me for organizing everything so well. His calmness confirmed what I already knew. He believed he was safe. He believed his husband double life story was still protected. And that belief allowed everything to fall into place exactly as I needed. The guest list was not random. Each person invited had a role, whether they knew it or not. Close friends, professional associates, and familiar faces filled the room. These were people who understood us, who had seen our marriage from the outside, who believed in the image Daniel had created. That was important. Because when the truth emerged, it would not be dismissed as confusion or exaggeration. It would be seen clearly, without doubt. Nondi Masco stood beside me as the final arrangements were completed. She did not ask unnecessary questions. She did not express doubt. Her presence alone was steady and reassuring. "Everything is ready," she said quietly. I nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Ready did not simply mean prepared. It meant irreversible. Once the evening began, there would be no turning back. The plan would unfold exactly as intended. And I was prepared for every possible outcome. As guests began to arrive, I welcomed each one with a calm and composed presence. My voice was steady, my movements controlled, my expression warm. No one could see what was beneath the surface. No one could sense the shift that was about to take place. That was intentional. Because the effectiveness of the moment depended on contrast. The greater the calm, the stronger the impact when the truth appeared. Conversations filled the room. Laughter echoed through the space. Glasses were raised, and compliments were shared. Everything appeared normal, even perfect. But I was not distracted. I was aware of every detail, every movement, every passing second. Time was no longer something that moved freely. It was something I controlled. Daniel moved comfortably among the guests, engaging in conversation, unaware of what was approaching. He greeted people with ease, his confidence unchanged, his composure intact. To anyone watching, he was the same man he had always been. But I knew the truth. I knew that beneath that calm exterior was a carefully hidden reality, a secret family revealed, waiting for its moment to surface. And that moment was closer than he realized. I positioned myself where I could see everything clearly. The entrance, the guests, Daniel himself. Every element was within view. This was not about confrontation driven by emotion. This was about presentation driven by clarity. The truth would not be shouted. It would be shown. And once it was seen, it would speak for itself. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere reached its peak. The room was full, the energy steady, the setting complete. This was the moment I had been building toward. The final stage of a dramatic true story that would unfold without confusion, without interruption, and without escape. Nandi approached me once more, her voice calm but firm. "It's time," she said. I took a slow breath, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Everything was aligned. Every step had led to this exact moment. There was no uncertainty left, no hesitation remaining. Only action. Because the truth does not wait forever. It arrives when it is ready, and when it does, it changes everything in its path. I looked across the room at Daniel, who was still unaware, still comfortable, still confident. For a brief moment, I observed him not as my husband, but as a man who had made his choices, who had built his secrets, who had believed those secrets would never be revealed. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This was not about destroying him. It was about revealing him. Because once the truth stands in the open, it does not need force. It does not need explanation. It simply exists. And its existence is enough. The final step was no longer a plan. It was a decision. And I was ready to make it. The moment had arrived, not with noise, but with certainty. My name is Amara Dlamini, and everything I had prepared, every detail I had controlled, every step I had taken, led to this exact point. The room was full, the energy steady, and the illusion of perfection was still intact. But beneath that calm surface, the truth was ready to rise. This was no longer just a private discovery. This was the final stage of a carefully structured, marriage betrayal story, and it was about to be revealed in full view. I stood at the center of the room, composed and steady, allowing the atmosphere to settle before I spoke. The conversations softened as attention slowly turned toward me. There was no rush in my movement, no sign of hesitation in my voice. I had already faced the truth in private. Now, I was ready to present it in public. Daniel Dlamini stood a few steps away, watching with quiet curiosity, unaware that the moment he had avoided for so long had finally arrived. He believed this was just another part of the evening, another small speech, another simple gesture. That belief was about to be broken. I raised my glass slightly, signaling for attention, and when the room fell silent, I began to speak. My words were calm, clear, and deliberate. I spoke about trust, about commitment, about the image we create for others to see. The guests listened closely, their expressions attentive, their expectations simple. They believed they were hearing a reflection of a successful life. But I was not speaking about appearances. I was speaking about truth. As I continued, I allowed my words to shift gently, moving from general reflection to something more precise. I spoke about honesty, about the weight of secrets, about the cost of living two lives at once. There was a subtle change in the room, a quiet tension that began to form. People could feel that something was different, even if they did not yet understand what it was. Daniel's expression shifted slightly, not in fear, but in confusion. He was beginning to sense that this moment was not as simple as he had expected. And then, I reached the point I had been preparing for. I paused briefly, allowing the silence to settle fully, and then I spoke the truth without raising my voice, without breaking my composure. I revealed the existence of his second life. I revealed the patterns, the places, the evidence. Not as accusations, but as facts. Clear, structured, and undeniable. This was the moment of hidden truth exposed, you. And it did not need force to be understood. The room fell completely still. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of the truth settled over every person present, and in that silence, everything changed. Daniel stood frozen, his confidence gone, his control slipping away. For the first time, he was not prepared. For the first time, he could not manage the narrative. Because this was not a private conversation he could redirect. This was a public reality he could not escape. I did not stop there. I allowed the full picture to be seen. The connections, the timeline, the reality of a husband-double life story that had been hidden for too long. And within that truth, the existence of a secret family revealed became undeniable. The impact was immediate. The room shifted from calm to shock, from comfort to clarity. People understood what they were witnessing. This was not confusion. This was not exaggeration. This was truth, presented without emotion, without distortion, and without fear. Daniel attempted to respond, his voice uncertain, his words unstructured. But it was too late. The moment had already moved beyond explanation. The truth, once revealed, does not return to silence. It stands on its own, complete and irreversible. I remained calm, allowing him to speak, not to defend himself, but to reveal the absence of control he once believed he had. This was not about argument. This was about clarity. And clarity had already been achieved. I lowered my glass slowly, my role in the moment complete. This was never about creating chaos. It was about ending deception. It was about bringing a hidden reality into the light in a way that could not be denied. This was the conclusion of a carefully executed, revenge story time, not driven by anger, but by truth and control. As I looked around the room, I saw understanding in the faces of those present. Not sympathy, not pity, but recognition. They understood what had been revealed. They understood the strength it required to stand in that moment with composure. And more importantly, they understood that this was not an act of destruction. It was an act of resolution. I turned my attention back to Daniel for a final moment. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with clarity. Because in the end, the truth does not belong to the person who hides it. It belongs to the moment it is revealed. And in that moment, everything changes. Without another word, I stepped away, leaving behind the life that had been built on deception. I did not look back. There was nothing left to question, nothing left to prove. The truth had already done its work. And as I walked forward, I understood something fully. A dramatic true story does not end when the truth is revealed. It begins again, with clarity, with strength, and with the freedom that comes from no longer living in doubt. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of truth and the power of clarity, make sure you like, share, and comment. Let me know where you are watching from, and stay connected for more powerful stories that remind us all that truth, no matter how hidden, always finds its way into the light.